Just hours ago, a candlelight vigil and balloon release was held for a Charlotte mother who was killed. Police say 31-year-old Frezja Baker was found dead Thursday after going missing earlier this month.
Before we go any further, let me ask you something. How does a woman leave her child somewhere safe, make one last phone call saying, "I'm almost there," and then vanish without a trace? No warning. No goodbye. No explanation. This is one of those cases that stays with you, and if stories like this matter to you, do me a small favor right now. Like this video, subscribe to Hominy Crime, and click the bell icon. Because cases like Frezja Baker's only stay alive when people keep listening. Frezja Baker wasn't a mystery. She wasn't someone who lived off the grid or drifted from place to place. She was a 31-year-old mother, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, trying to balance life, responsibility, and love for her young son. Friends and family described her as warm, lively, the kind of person whose presence filled a room. Most importantly, she was deeply attached to her child. People close to her were clear about one thing: Frezja did not just disappear. She would not willingly walk away from her son. That single fact became the heartbeat of this entire case. On the evening she vanished, Frezja did something many parents do every day. She dropped her young son off with family members, somewhere he would be safe and cared for. Nothing about that moment seemed unusual. There was no argument reported, no visible distress, no indication that this night would end any differently from the others before it. After leaving her child, Frezja got into her car and drove off into the Charlotte night. Later that evening, she made a phone call to a family member. Her voice was calm. She said she was about an hour away. Those words would later replay endlessly in the minds of the people who loved her. An hour away from where? Home. A meeting. Somewhere familiar. Whatever the destination was, Frezja never made it. When she didn't arrive and stopped responding to calls and messages, concern quickly turned into fear. This wasn't like her. Time passed. Minutes became hours. Hours became a night of no sleep for her family. By the next day, it was clear something was wrong. Frezja Baker was missing. As police began their search, details trickled out slowly. Her car, a gray-blue Honda Accord, was also gone. There were no confirmed sightings that explained where she went after that last call. For a mother who never stayed out of contact, the silence was loud. Too loud. And the longer it stretched on, the more unsettling it became. I want you to think about this for a moment. If someone you loved said they were an hour away and never showed up, how long would it take before your worry turned into panic? At what point would you know, deep down, that something terrible had happened? This is only the beginning of Frezja Baker's story. And in the next part, we're going to talk about the search, the unanswered questions, and the growing tension as days passed with no sign of her. As the days passed, the fear around Frezja's disappearance only grew heavier. This wasn't a case where someone went missing and people thought, maybe she just needs space. Every single person close to her kept saying the same thing: Frezja would never do this. She wouldn't ignore her phone. She wouldn't leave her child wondering where his mother was. So when police officially listed her as missing, the urgency felt personal, not procedural. Flyers began circulating. Her photo spread across social media. Friends, family, even strangers shared her face, hoping someone, somewhere, had seen her. People were asked to look out for her car, the gray-blue Honda Accord, because that vehicle had essentially become the biggest clue. If the car could be found, maybe Frezja could be found too. Or at least answers. Police retraced her known movements from that night. They reviewed surveillance footage from areas she was believed to have passed through. They spoke with family members, friends, and anyone who had contact with her in the days leading up to her disappearance. And yet, nothing concrete surfaced. No clear direction. No confirmed timeline after that final phone call. It was like Frezja and her car had slipped into a gap the world couldn't see into. And that's when the tension really set in. Because when time keeps moving forward but answers don't, hope starts to feel fragile. Every day she remained missing made people ask the question nobody wanted to say out loud. Was she still alive? The community began to feel it too. Vigils were held. Prayers were shared. People who had never met Frezja felt connected to her story, especially parents. Because it's one thing to hear about a missing adult, and another to hear about a mother who vanished after dropping off her child. That detail alone made this case hit harder. Then, about a week after Frezja was last seen, everything changed. Police were called to an area in West Charlotte, near a church property that didn't see much activity. Behind that church, officers discovered a vehicle. It was parked quietly, almost like it had been meant to blend into the background. When they checked the car, they realized it matched the description everyone had been searching for. It was Frezja's Honda Accord. Inside the car, they found Frezja. She was unresponsive. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Let that sink in for a second. After days of searching, hoping, and praying, the answer came not with relief, but with devastation. The woman people had been trying to bring home had been there all along, hidden in plain sight, behind a place meant for refuge. Police did not immediately release details about how she died. What they did confirm was enough to change the direction of the case entirely. This was no longer a missing person investigation. This was now a homicide investigation. Think about the emotional whiplash her family must have felt. One moment clinging to hope, the next facing a reality so final it takes your breath away. And for her child, a future now permanently altered. But here's where things take another turn. Because as police dug deeper, they didn't just find a victim. They began to piece together a story. A connection. Someone who had been part of Frezja's life, someone investigators believe knew more than they were saying. In the next part, we're going to talk about that breakthrough, the arrest, and the questions that followed. Because finding Frezja answered one question, but it opened the door to many more. Once Frezja was found, everything shifted. The silence that surrounded her disappearance was replaced with pressure, questions, and urgency. Police now had a location, a timeline gap, and a responsibility to explain how a young mother ended up dead inside her own car. And almost immediately, investigators began looking closely at the people in her orbit. Because in cases like this, the truth usually isn't far away. It's close. Uncomfortably close. As detectives worked, they uncovered signs that Frezja's life may not have been as calm as it appeared on the surface. Like many people, she had relationships that were complicated. Ones that weren't always visible to family or friends. And it was within that private space of her life that police believed the answers were hiding. Not long after her body was discovered, authorities made an arrest. A man they identified as someone Frezja knew personally. Someone she had a connection with. His name was Lorenzo Inman Jr. When police announced the arrest, the reaction was immediate. Shock, anger, heartbreak. Because once again, this wasn't a random stranger. This was someone who had access to her. Someone who, at some point, was trusted. Inman was charged with murder, along with additional charges related to domestic violence. That detail alone caused many people following the case to pause. Domestic violence charges don't come out of nowhere. They suggest a pattern. A history. And suddenly, Frezja's story began to look painfully familiar to many viewers watching from home.
Away from us and away from everyone that loved her, you're a coward. You didn't deserve to breathe.
Police did not release full details about what they believe happened that night. But what we do know is this: Frezja dropped her child somewhere safe. She made a phone call saying she was almost there. Somewhere between that call and the church parking lot, her life ended. And investigators believe the person responsible was not a stranger lurking in the dark, but someone already inside her world. Court appearances followed. Inman was held without bond. The courtroom was heavy with emotion. For Frezja's family, justice had begun, but closure was still far away. Because an arrest doesn't answer the hardest questions. It doesn't explain the fear she may have felt. It doesn't explain why help didn't come sooner. And it certainly doesn't bring her back to her child. This is the part of the story where people often say, at least they caught someone. But is that really enough? A child will grow up without his mother. A family will live with unanswered questions. And a life that once carried laughter, warmth, and plans for the future has been reduced to evidence, court dates, and headlines. I want you to really think about this. How many warning signs do we ignore because they happen behind closed doors? How many people suffer quietly because the world only sees what's shared publicly? And how many stories like Frezja's only get attention after it's already too late? In the final part, we're going to sit with those questions. We'll talk about the psychological weight of this case, what it says about trust, danger, and silence, and why stories like this matter far beyond one headline. Before we close this story completely, I want to slow it down for a moment. Because when cases like this end, the danger is that they turn into background noise. Another tragic name. Another sad ending. And then we scroll on. But Frezja Baker's life didn't end as content. It ended as a human loss, and that difference matters. Ask yourself this honestly. If Frezja were your sister, your friend, your neighbor, would the details feel different? Would you still say, these things happen, or would you be demanding answers, accountability, and change? Sometimes the only thing separating empathy from indifference is distance. There's also the question of silence. Who stays quiet in these situations, and why? Fear. Love. Shame. And how often does that silence protect the wrong person? If speaking up earlier could change an outcome, when does silence become dangerous? This case forces us to reflect on patterns we don't like to admit exist. Control disguised as care. Conflict hidden behind normal routines. And the illusion that danger always looks obvious when, in reality, it often looks familiar. So I'll leave you with this. What warning signs do we still underestimate? How many stories go untold because they don't look dramatic enough at first? And if awareness is the first step to prevention, what responsibility do we have as listeners? If this story stayed with you, don't let it fade. Like this video, subscribe to Hominy Crime, and click the bell icon so you stay connected to stories that matter. Share your thoughts below, because discussion keeps these cases alive, and sometimes, being heard is the first step toward being saved.